This is Outdated, and welcome back to the next episode of Outdated Reviews. Today, we are going to look at another core book, but from a different game. We're going to look at Delta Green, the Agent's Handbook. I guess you could say it's their version of the Player's Handbook. And so we're going to break down the construction, talk about what's in here. Is this an all-in-one solution, or do you have to buy more stuff? That sort of thing. But before we do that, let's go ahead and have a word from our sponsors. Why's nothing happening? Do we have sponsors? We don't have not even like a NordV? No? No? What about like Manscaped? No? Nothing? Shit. Okay. Let's just look at the book then. Screw it. Okay, so Delta Green got its start back in the 90s, and in a weird twist of fate, it is a spin-off of a existing TTRPG, Call of Cthulhu. It was actually a setting set in the modern day. At that time, it would have been the 90s. It was in development at the same time that the TV show The X-Files was in development. And what makes it fascinating is they kind of evolved in parallel courses, and this definitely shares some X-Files DNA. There's no doubt about it. But that was completely accidental. So this we have, although Call of Cthulhu is by Chaosium, Delta Green, the modern version of Delta Green, is by Arc Dream Publishing. I thought their symbol would be back here somewhere, but it's not. It's probably inside someplace. But this is the book. You see we have a flat spine right there. Right off, the art is good. I just have no idea why I'm looking at this guy, right? I mean, I love the perspiration on his face. You can tell that there's stress, like he stressed this ancient book right here in his hand. You flip over, you see this guy all sweaty down here and somebody about to shoot him in the head. I mean, like, it does not play, right? And welcome to the apocalypse. That pretty much fits. So the concept of this is the H.P. Lovecraft story, The Shadow over Innsmouth, ends when the main character escapes from these half-human, half-amphibian creatures in the town, that the town's full of them, and the U.S. military shows up and cleans house. This posits that after that discovery, they create an organization whose job is to fight the forces of the unnatural. And they peg those things, deep ones, from the Cthulhu mythos as unnatural. So that's what you're doing here. A role-playing game of Lovecraftian horror and conspiracy. So you're trying to stop the forces of the unnatural and what they're doing to people or whatever. And you're also trying to cover up that it exists. You don't want regular people to know that these things are out there. That the things that go bump in the night are actually things and not their imagination. Like that thing hiding under your bed just might be something under your bed. They don't want people to know that, right? So their job is to stop it and to clean up the mess. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. And first off, nice solid construction, right? You'll notice not a ton of glossiness. It's glossy where it says Delta Green, and that's it. Everything else is matte. I would say that that's probably a good choice here because this game is pretty dark, and I mean, like, very dark. I would say, like, where D&D you can play when you're 10 or whatever. Not this. No. Like, just no. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. And right off, here we go. I said last time that, you know, sometimes you just want a color to set the mood, but I don't like wasted space. This really isn't wasted space because this is setting the mood really well. You're seeing, like, redacted documents and emails, and if you read them, it kind of puts you in the mood for what's going to happen in the game, right? And they keep doing it right there. And so here's our Agent's Handbook. I love how it looks like somebody tried to burn it, and they pulled it out from Arc Dream Publishing. Table of contents. Okay, every chapter has this big green thing with a picture. The art is pretty good. Sometimes you'll see the horrific things that are out there. Sometimes it's just generic government agent kind of stuff. Your character is a member of Delta Green. It is a super secret organization. You are also a member of something else. You have an actual job that you go do, right? You could be an FBI agent, or you could be a scientist that, studies cosmic phenomenon, or a researcher who studies viral diseases, things like that. You do different things, but whenever Delta Green makes the call, you drop what you're doing and you go, okay? So a couple of major things that are different from, like, say, if you're a D&D-er, you're used to certain things that this doesn't do. D&D is a class-based system, and I haven't really gone over that in the previous video, but it's like you have a class, and that class determines what you can do for the most part, and as you level up, you get better and better at those things. This is a skill-based system. There are no classes. You have just a bunch of skills. As you use one, you have the chance to make it better, right? The emphasis is not combat, but combat does happen. Example, if you use a gun, which is pretty expected in the 90s in America, if you're a government agent, right? If you use a gun, each gun has a lethality rating. So let's say the lethality rating on the gun that my character is using to shoot someone is 20%. When I roll my percentage dice, because that's how you do it, you roll your percentage dice, and let's say my handgun skill is at 70%. If I roll 70 or below on the percentage dice, I hit. Okay, it's that simple, and then they just take the damage based on the roll or whatever. But the lethality rating, if I roll a 20 or below, they're dead instantly. It's just done, right? Because it's a gun, and that's kind of what they do, right? They're really only good for one thing. So if you fail, like when you roll to hit, and you hit, but you did not achieve the lethality rating, whatever the numbers are on the die, the two 10-sided dice added together, that is the damage they take. Think about this for a second. Usually you do that because you rolled high. At least one number is, like in my 70 or below case, one number is probably going to be a 7 or high, possibly a 7 or higher. Most people have around 10 hit points, so more than likely you're going to die anyway. It's just going to look a little different. But so combat is very quick, very lethal. As a stark contrast to Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, or really Dungeons & Dragons period, you want to avoid combat if you can. Because, this takes place in the 1990s. There's no, let's go, there's a lethality rating right there. Let's go to a church and pay a bunch of money to resurrect the dead or whatever. No, dead's dead, you're done, make a new character, right? So, I love this stuff. And since this is a offshoot of Call of Cthulhu, sanity is a big part of this. As your character encounters different horrific things, their sanity is going to degrade. If your character doesn't die while playing, there's a good bet eventually your character will just go nuts to the point where you can't use them anymore. For lack of a better way of putting it, if you are a DM who doesn't like killing off player characters unless it fits some sort of narrative purpose, and I have to admit, for most of my D&D career, that is the case, this is not the game for you. Because you don't get too attached, right? It's going to be more about the mission than it is about the person. And the saying in Delta Green is, you do the mission until you become the mission. Meaning somebody has to come in and get rid of you because you've become an issue. So it is a steady spiral down, descent into madness, and that's the part you're playing. So I know you're probably like, well, that's a really big downer, right? Especially when you're coming from something like D&D, right? Yeah, it is a downer, no doubt about it. But as someone who, for a living teaches literature, the most fascinating characters are those tragic heroes that have some terrible flaw that leads to their demise. Hamlet, right? Macbeth. Those folks. Okonkwo. I could name these all day long. Again, I do that for a living. But that would be the type of character you're playing. And in that regard, if it's about the story and not about your character and you, it's easier once you kind of get yourself into that mindset. But the paper is semi-glossy. It's a pretty thick stock. It is definitely thicker than the Player's Handbook was. And most importantly, we have all the rules in here. We have all the skills and how they work. We have actually how to run the game in a basic sense. It's just straightforward and to the point. We have different ways you can make your character coming from professions and the skills they probably have. This, although there is a book to come after this, this honestly is an all-in-one solution, which is one of the things I dinged the Player's Handbook for D&D with. I'm not dinging that here. This is an all-in-one solution. So let's go ahead and take a look at the construction more closely. Again, back is being used for something. It's continuing the mood, I guess. You know, you do have a character sheet in the back. Don't want to forget that. It is one page front and back, and you're done. All right. Here's their OGL. This is not a D20 system. Again, this is based off Call of Cthulhu, so it is called the Basic Role-Playing System. And unlike Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro, Chaosium doesn't suck, so they don't like pitch a fit because they're not making all kinds of money off of you. They're doing just fine, thanks. So let's take a look at the binding, because the other thing I dinged the living crap out of the Player's Handbook for was its glued binding for a book that you're going to be using all the time. For hardback books, and look, I can even see it right here. This is stitched binding. There's a lot of stitching down through here. But another way you could tell, right here, the eye. You can see where it bows and flexes, and there's a gap between the board and the ribbon. That shows that it's stitched binding and it's done well. And the book stays open. So yeah, I'm going to try one farther back, because sometimes near the end... No, how about the front? No, this thing stays open. It does its job. Okay, so one thing it does have in common with D&D is that its system can be used for anything. The difference is this makes a point of adapting the system to fit its story, being a member of Delta Green in modern day. And so it doesn't have to be the 90s. That's when the thing was first created. But, I mean, it could be like 2023. That's fine. Okay? It caters the system to its time. The lethality rating being a great example. That's not a Call of Cthulhu thing. It gives you everything you need to play. It's very well constructed. It sets its tone. If you have the right set of players, a group of players that are willing to get in. Oh, and I got to mention one more thing. Remember when in episode 1, when I talked about how the book was $50, but it used cheap glued binding? This one's only $40, and it uses proper stitched binding, right? See how big it is. Now, this one isn't as long. It's 192 pages. Generally speaking, the bigger the book, the more you need stitch binding, not the other way around. So, with 190-something pages, I'd still ding them, but they could potentially get away with it. But they don't. They go the extra mile and give you a good product for a fair price, right? So, on a scale of 0 to 10, I'm going to have to give Delta Green, the Agent's Handbook, a 9.5. My only concern, honestly, is the art, and it's not the style of art. It's not how the art looks. It's that sometimes the art doesn't seem to have much to do with what's on the page. And so the images themselves are great, but sometimes you're like, oh, okay, we're talking about if my character was a Marine Corps Security Force regiment, but you got this dude with blood all over his hand, and he wrote on the wall, "Waits dreaming in his own blood." What does that have to do with working for the Marines Security Force? That, or they've got like the worst HR department ever. I'm just saying. right? So that would be my issue. But everything else, so good. This is a 9.5 out of 10, especially if you're, like 18 or older, you have players who are mature and can handle it. I highly recommend this. So I want to thank you so much for watching. Please hit like and subscribe. Hit that notification bell if you're interested. Again, this is not a review copy, so Arc Dream Publishing, I'm not thanking you for a review copy. This is my copy. I bought it myself. So maybe one day I won't be, a nobody, but as of now, that's where we are. So I will see you on the next episode of Outdated Reviews.